Alpine Liquid Fertilizers is your full season crop fertility specialist from start to finish. Visit alpinepfl.com for more.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to the Southwest Ag Conference at the University of Guelph at Ridgetown campus. I am here with our keynote speaker now, Mark Gasparotto, retired colonel. Sir, how you doing?
I'm very well. Bernard, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hey, a great presentation today, and I want to talk about your journey and how to struggle well. And before we get into that, take us back. You served in, Afghanistan, Kandahar. Take us back there and share some of those experiences.
Okay. And so a lot of what I learned about struggling well came from my experiences on those grim desert battlefields. And I was lucky in a sense from a professional perspective to take part in something called Operation Medusa. And that's Canada's largest combat operation since the Korean War. And at the time was NATO's largest combat operation in its history. And there were many ups and downs. There were some failures at the beginning. And we learned some very hard lessons. As a result, it was quite a test of personal resilience and the team's resilience. Right. And as I've reflected upon those experiences, that's what it's enabled me to share some of those lessons and messages with communities like the ones gathered here at the Southwest Ag.
Lots of lessons for farmers in what you shared today.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think the lessons from drought and the lessons that farmers learn, hardships within the environment, within the market. So I think there's many parallels. Yeah. Between what a soldier goes through. We talk about chewing the same dirt as a soldier, which can be a literal expression, and farmers certainly share that as well.
For sure. Let's talk about resilience. And okay. You said, you can learn to be resilient. You can build resilience. You can learn to struggle well. How did that all come together for what you do now?
So we're all born with certain personality traits, right? And they can be helpful to be resilient, but to be clear, and really the science is clear, and my own experience backs it up. Resilience is something that can be taught, it can be learned, and it can be practiced. And the more you learn about it, and the more you practice, the more resilient you are. And what's interesting about stress inoculation, what we've learned is you just can't throw someone in the deep end. Yeah. Some people may swim, but not everyone. It's actually much better to train people to be resilient, to give them the skills to navigate in that adverse environment, and then force them to do hard things in terms of that inoculation, which makes them more resilient.
You said something really impactful today in the speech. You don't necessarily rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training.
Yes.
I mean, tell us about that.
So that's a quote, attributed originally to a Russian general. So that's why you train hard and fight easy, okay? Because most of us, there are exceptions, but most of us, we actually don't rise to that occasion. We sink to that level of training. So it really is about preparation. And so how can you prepare yourself to be more resilient? And this is where it is something that with intention, okay, with the proper resources, you can build up to do things. You think, I use running a marathon. No one's ever born to run a marathon. Me neither. But you can train to do it, and there's some science there, and then there's just some grit. Yeah. But you need it both. Yeah. Yeah. You need it both.
You talked about 3 phases of resilience. I'll run through these and give people a little sense of the presentation today. You started with preparation. You talked about the barbell strategy. Adding to your life by subtracting from it. Take us through some of those thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, so there are 3 phases, and farmers would understand this from a seasonal perspective. If you're an athlete, you go to practice, and then you have a game, and then you recover. Right, and then you do it all over again. So that's the cycle of preparation, performance, and then recovery. So the barbell strategy and that via negativa, which is Latin for adding to your life by subtracting from it, that comes from a book called Anti-Fragile. Super interesting book, although quite dense. So we often think if we're going to add to our life, we need more, right? And we live in a materialistic consumer society. We add more, we add more, we add more. But often it's about simplifying, okay? Trading away drama, removing the limiting factors on what's going on, taking away the stress from our life as opposed to adding excitement to it. And that makes us more resilient.
Now, you talked about, that negativity, the barbell strategy.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, and one that I think intuitively makes sense to many of us. So if you think of someone lifting a barbell, if they were to drop that, the weights are on the outside, right? But so they're safe at the core, but the risk is on the extremities. So how do you ensure that you've got financial stability or some market stability that you can rely on when things are cyclical, right? You've got a baseline of things that allow you to heat your home and feed your family, right? And at least take care of payroll and some other things. And then you experiment on the sides. And if those experiments fail, because many of them will, right? If it's true innovation, many of them will, it's not going to sink the ship.
Right.
Yeah.
What about, you mentioned you have to do hard times.
Hard things.
Hard things.
Yeah, you can't click your way to resilience. You have to do hard things, although, as I mentioned earlier, you still need the theory, you still need the tips and tricks to understand how to react in adversity. But ultimately, you need to do hard things. You need to do hard things physically, emotionally, from a mental perspective, so keeping your mind sharp, and also from a spiritual perspective, which I also equate to purpose. Yeah. And then you need to do hard things as a team, because when you and I do something hard together, all right, we now have a bond of human connection that's focused on an experience. The more uncommon, the better. And we have a bond of human connection because we've overcome a challenge together. So we call that chewing the same dirt.
Chewing the same dirt.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, we talked about crisis and rising to the occasion and sort of falling to the level of your training. We also talked about, you have to train as you fight, and you had this great quote from Mike Tyson, which I love. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
You ever been punched in the face?
A few times.
Okay.
Not too many.
Well, it provides such an incredible physiological response, right, when you get punched in the face. So it's really about, planning's important, and that gets you to the start line. But after that, you don't fight the plan, because everything has a vote in the environment, whether they're competitor and as a soldier, the enemy, the weather for a farmer, or other things in the environment or the marketplace. And so if you just fight your plan, it's devoid of reality. And so, but the act of planning, in going through those plans and having a contingency, a plan A, B, C, and D, and understanding what the triggers are that flows to those other plans, is what allows you to react with a lot of flexibility in that dynamic environment.
Let's talk a little bit about that second part of resilience, and that is performance. And you talked about, controlling what you can control.
Yes. That requires a lot of emotional maturity, because when we're under stress, if we want to avoid overwhelm, we really need to focus on what actually matters in all of this. Okay, what's noise, what's signal, and then even what matters, how much can I actually influence that or control it? Because if I can't, it's a waste of precious resources. And in a crisis, that really, it comes in limited supply.
Yeah. And you said that's leadership, right? You need to lead yourself.
You need to lead yourself.
Yeah. I was fascinated, just physical aspects of this. Breathing. Take us to the breathing exercise.
So what we're taught as soldiers is something called box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and then hold it again. And there are other patterns. If anyone is in martial arts or yoga, or any woman that's been pregnant in terms of Lamaze, so there are different patterns. Probably for soldiers, they wanted something simple, right? So 4 times 4 is highly memorable, and so under extreme stress, like a gunfight, we can remember that. And what controlled breathing does, so breathing is a semi-autonomous physiological function, which means it goes on in the background, or you can take control of it consciously, should you choose to. And what that does is it snaps you out of 2 systems of thinking. One is system 1 is fast, right? That's highly emotional. That's what happens quite quickly. Stress responses, for example, this is going back into the most primitive part of our brain. And then system 2, thinking slow, which is more deliberate, more rational. And so controlled breathing allows you to move from the limbic system, or fight, flight, freeze, posture, submit, those animal instincts to fear, back into the neocortex, which is at the front, which is the thinking, the rational part of the brain, right? And so sometimes you do need that to react, okay? But after the physical threat is no longer there, and so you've got some space, you're calming yourself down, you're oxygenating your body, therefore you're providing focus through that controlled breathing. It allows you to think through the problem.
Yeah. I've got to do more of that. Talk about phase 3 here, and then part 3, recovery. And you talked about facilitating healing and adoption, and adoption here. And you talked about gratitude.
Yes.
The importance of gratitude.
So before I get into gratitude, so there's 3 phases to resilience, okay, before, during, and after. And the after part is that recovery. Recovery is 1/3 of the resilience equation, but yet most people don't give it the same level of intentionality that they might give preparation. And that's a costly mistake. Costly mistake. So gratitude for me, I've had some interesting experiences. I've had some very close calls in terms of threats to my life when I was overseas. And so I look at life differently now. And I'm very grateful because in Kandahar I didn't know if I'd see the sunrise. And so the sunrise symbolically meant, right, I've survived another day, to fight another day, to live another day. But not every one of us lives. And so to truly live, you need to be grateful for what you have. And you can either be born with a grateful disposition, or you can practice it. This is another one of these things that can be practiced. And so I've had to deliberately practice gratitude.
What about sleep? You mentioned the importance of sleep here.
Yes.
I mean, most of us don't get enough.
Most of us don't. And that's why most of us will end up in an early grave. So sleep's my go-to hack, if you will, for resilience. Because 24 hours without sleep and you're like 0.08 drunk. So your levels of sleep can degrade very quickly within a day, right? It's unlike nutrition or even physical fitness, right? That has a longer half-life before you start to see declines in performance. But sleep's pretty quick. You can't bank it, but you can catch up on it. And we also own all the inputs. We can decide when we're going to go to bed, typically, when we're going to get up. We can decide how the bedroom is going to be in terms of temperature and darkness and noise. We can decide what we're going to put into our body, either blue light or alcohol or caffeine, for example, which all impact sleep patterns. Sleep for me is the number one thing that I ensure. I'm on the road a lot, and I privilege my sleep over almost everything else, so I can perform. And for me, the results are crystal clear, and the science is clear.
Hey, you got lots here. One of the things you had is ask for help. Sort of like that wrap of that 3rd phase.
So many people, I'm assuming in farming, like the military, a lot of type A. So there needs to be strength, right? I need to be strong all the time. And yes, you do need strength, but you also need to know when you're going to ask for help. Because people may or may not realize if you're struggling or if you're struggling well. and if you don't ask for help, your resilience reserves may get to a point that's below what you can do or what your friends can do for you, and you need professional help or you need medical attention. And so before you get to that point, the bonds of human connection, what we know is people that live the longest, happiest, most resilient lives are the ones that have the best relationships.
Community, right?
Community. The bonds of human connection, and sometimes that means you need to ask for help. But also there's a flip side of that where you can check in on the people you care about. And so, very intentionally, are you checking in on those people and just seeing how they're doing?
Right. What about, I guess we'll just wrap up with a thought on, how important is it to be resilient? Now, obviously, you've seen it on the battlefield, but we see it in all aspects of our lives, our relationships, the things we do. How important is it to be resilient?
Well, life, for the vast majority of us, there's going to be challenge. For most of us, there's going to be struggle. For some of us, there's even going to be suffering. And so that is a fact of life. Okay, you're going to be hit with things that are uncomfortable, that are difficult. If you aren't able to deal with those things, you're going to suffer, either from a mental health perspective or a physical health perspective. And because resilience can be trained, it's really incumbent upon you to make yourself as strong, as resilient as possible to be able to live a full life, a life where you live into your potential.
Right.
And without resilience, you just won't get there.
Well, Mark Gasparotto, Colonel Mark Gasparotto, retired Colonel Mark Gasparotto, but
Yes.
but you're doing a lot of work these days.
I am.
Tell us about the book.
Okay.
Clearing the Way.
So I wrote that book, Clearing the Way, Combat Engineers in Kandahar, when I returned from Kandahar in 2007. I wrote about half of the book, and then another 12 members of my squadron wrote shorter stories for the second half. So there are multiple viewpoints, and in some cases on the same incident, from different members of the squadron, different authors. So it's about 2-3 Field Squadron and our experiences in Kandahar during Operation Medusa and all the construction we had to do after the fact, and all the bomb disposal and taking care of improvised explosive devices. So it's a super interesting, violent, in many cases, story. It's also been turned into a documentary film of the same name, and you can see that on Vimeo.
Awesome. Well, great stuff, Mark. Thank you for stopping by. Check out Mark whenever you can. Doing a lot of speaking engagements, and obviously a lot of helpful advice on how to be resilient, how to manage yourself, be as much as you can be, sir. Thank you, and thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for dropping by.
Okay.